Most older men completely miss the moment a younger woman becomes interested in them, not because they lack value, attractiveness, or life experience, but because attraction at that stage rarely appears in an obvious way. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself clearly. It usually shows up indirectly through timing, curiosity, subtle shifts in tone, and questions that sound innocent unless you understand what's really happening underneath them. That's where most men lose the moment without realizing it. A younger woman leans in slightly. The conversation slows down. She asks something personal but frames it casually. And instead of recognizing the emotional opening, the man suddenly changes his energy. He starts explaining himself, defending his lifestyle, trying to sound impressive or over-answering simple questions. And the second that happens, the emotional tension collapses. Not because she lost attraction, because she stopped feeling grounded in his presence. That's the part most men never understand. Younger women who are drawn to older men usually are not searching for perfection. They're responding to something far deeper: calmness, emotional steadiness, direction, self-awareness, and a man who seems comfortable in his own skin. The questions they ask are rarely about information alone. They are emotional tests without looking like tests. They're feeling your energy more than evaluating your words. And in this video from Intimate Psychology, we're going to break down the exact kinds of questions younger women ask when they secretly want to move things forward with an older man, and more importantly, what they're truly looking for beneath those questions. Because once you understand the psychology underneath the conversation, everything changes. You stop overthinking afterward. You stop replaying interactions in your head. You stop wondering whether she was interested. You begin noticing attraction while it's happening instead of after it's gone. Now, before we get into the actual questions, you first need to understand why older men miss these signals so often in the first place. The biggest reason is that they're looking for directness when attraction is usually subtle. A younger woman interested in an older man rarely behaves aggressively or obviously. She protects herself socially. She stays measured. She tests emotionally before investing openly. That's why interest often comes disguised as curiosity. She asks questions that sound normal on the surface, but emotionally they carry weight. And if you only listen to the words literally, you'll miss the meaning entirely. Another major issue is hesitation. A lot of older men second-guess themselves in these moments. They wonder if they're imagining the attraction, if they're reading too much into things, or if acting on it would somehow look inappropriate. That uncertainty leaks into their voice and body language. And attraction weakens the moment emotional hesitation takes over. Confidence is not aggressively pushing forward. Confidence is simply remaining relaxed without needing certainty before allowing the interaction to unfold naturally. Then comes the biggest mistake of all: over-explaining. Older men have experience, stories, lessons, and depth. But attraction is emotional, not informational. The moment a younger woman asks something slightly personal, many men immediately start giving long explanations to prove their worth, justify their choices, or sound accomplished. But she wasn't asking for a presentation. She was checking your emotional center. And the more you overtalk, the harder it becomes for her to feel your groundedness. Another blind spot is misunderstanding female communication completely. Many men assume a woman will express interest the same way men do. She won't. Her social risk is different. Her emotional risk is different. That's why questions become her safest way to explore attraction without fully exposing herself. If she doesn't like the energy of your response, she can easily retreat while keeping everything socially comfortable. That's why these moments matter so much. And finally, many older men quietly underestimate themselves. They downplay their presence, their calmness, their maturity, or their emotional stability. Sometimes they even make self-deprecating jokes to appear humble or safe, but attraction requires polarity. And when a man minimizes himself constantly, the emotional tension disappears. Once you understand these dynamics, you stop seeing interactions as random. You begin recognizing patterns in real time. And that awareness changes how you listen, pause, speak, and respond. Now let's get into the first question younger women often ask when they're quietly interested. The first question usually sounds harmless. It might sound like, "So what are you doing later? What does your week usually look like? What do you usually do for fun?" On the surface, it feels casual. Underneath, it's deeply revealing. Because what she's really trying to understand is whether your life feels intentional and emotionally stable. She's not gathering information. She's feeling your energy. She wants to know whether you move through life with calm direction or whether you're emotionally drifting. And this is where many men ruin the moment immediately. Instead of answering simply, they start over explaining every detail of their schedule, accomplishments, responsibilities, or lifestyle because they think they need to sound impressive. But the more effort you put into proving yourself, the weaker your presence feels emotionally. What she's actually looking for is ease. Can you answer naturally without tension? Can you speak about your life without sounding defensive or performative? A grounded man answers simply because he has nothing to prove. And confidence in these moments is quiet, not loud. A short answer delivered calmly carries far more emotional weight than a long explanation filled with nervous energy. This question also tests how you handle subtle emotional pressure, because both of you unconsciously know the interaction could become something more. She's observing whether that possibility makes you anxious or whether you remain comfortable inside the moment. Men who panic internally often try to secure the interaction too quickly. They rush into making plans, overshare personal details, or begin seeking reassurance through conversation. That urgency weakens attraction immediately. Another hidden layer behind this question is emotional availability. She's quietly trying to sense whether your life has room for connection or whether it feels emotionally crowded, chaotic, bitter, or unresolved. And tone matters far more than the actual content of your answer. You can say very little and still create attraction if your energy feels relaxed and centered. Or you can say all the right things while completely losing emotional tension because your delivery feels strained. That's why rehearsed lines never work long term. Presence works, calmness works, emotional steadiness works. And this is also where silence becomes extremely powerful. A brief pause before answering communicates comfort. It shows you're not scrambling for approval or trying to impress her. You're simply present. And younger women notice that instinctively. Most men think they need to increase attraction during these moments, but attraction is already there, or the question wouldn't exist in the first place. Your job is not to force more attraction. Your job is simply not to destroy the emotional tension that already exists. Once you understand this, your responses become lighter, calmer, and more natural. And something interesting starts happening. Her body language softens. The interaction slows down naturally instead of feeling rushed. The tension becomes playful instead of awkward. That's when you know emotional alignment is happening. Now let's move into the second question because this is where she starts testing something even deeper. At this stage, the conversation has usually moved beyond surface level politeness. The emotional tone is warmer now, more personal. And the second question often sounds something like, have you ever dated someone younger before? Do you usually keep people at a distance? What are relationships usually like for you? Again, the words themselves are not the point. What she's really evaluating is emotional composure. She wants to see whether certain topics make you reactive, defensive, insecure, or emotionally unbalanced. And this is where many older men fail badly. The second they feel emotionally evaluated, they begin over-explaining themselves. They justify their past. They start sounding apologetic. They overshare relationship history, or they try too hard to sound emotionally advanced, and the moment that happens, the interaction stops feeling grounded. Because she wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for emotional stability. Experience doesn't need to announce itself loudly. Real maturity shows up through calmness, clarity, and comfort. A grounded answer doesn't sound defensive. It doesn't sound rehearsed. It sounds emotionally settled. And when a younger woman feels that level of calm certainty from an older man, attraction deepens very quickly because it confirms the emotional energy she was already sensing underneath the interaction. The way you answer these questions matters far more than most men realize. Timing matters. Tone matters. Energy matters. A younger woman can tell within seconds whether your response is grounded or whether you're suddenly trying to manage her perception of you. A rushed response communicates nervousness. A defensive response reveals insecurity. And a long, complicated answer usually signals overcompensation. The moment that happens, the emotional tension disappears. What keeps attraction alive is not perfection, it's composure. That's why a calm pause before answering can actually increase intrigue. It shows that you're comfortable with silence, comfortable with yourself. You're not scrambling to impress her or win approval. You're simply present in the interaction. And presence is magnetic. Another thing most men fail to understand is that this second question often contains an unspoken boundary test. She's observing how you handle attraction when it appears. Can you stay emotionally steady while feeling tension? Can you remain grounded without becoming overeager? Can you enjoy the energy without losing control of yourself? That's what she's really evaluating. If your reaction becomes too excited, too vulnerable, or too reactive, she immediately feels imbalance. But when your response is measured, calm, slightly playful, and emotionally centered, attraction strengthens naturally. And here's the important part. The actual words almost don't matter. Your tone, your pauses, your body language, your emotional steadiness communicate more than the story itself ever could. That's why so many older men fail these moments without understanding why. Technically, they answered the question correctly, but emotionally, their energy communicated anxiety instead of grounded confidence, and attraction responds to emotional energy first. This is also where polarity becomes important. She's not testing whether you can dominate her. She's testing whether your energy matches the calm, masculine presence she was initially drawn toward. You don't need to perform strength. You don't need to impress her. You only need to remain emotionally stable, aware, and relaxed inside the moment. That alone is enough. Handle this stage correctly, and the interaction naturally deepens. The conversation becomes warmer. The tension becomes more intimate. The emotional connection starts moving forward without force. Handle it poorly, and her curiosity often disappears quietly without explanation. That's why understanding the second question is so important. It separates the men who maintain attraction from the men who unintentionally collapse under subtle pressure. And once you recognize the real intention behind these questions, you stop overthinking your responses entirely. Now let's move into the third question, because this is usually the moment where attraction shifts from curiosity into possibility. By the time this question appears, the interaction has already become emotionally charged. She's no longer just exploring your personality, she's feeling the tension between you. And the question itself usually sounds innocent on the surface, but underneath it carries clear sexual undertones. The important thing to understand is this: she's rarely asking literally, she's watching your reaction. This is where many older men completely misread the moment, because instead of recognizing the emotional invitation underneath the question, they either panic, become overly cautious, joke nervously, or start over-explaining themselves. And all of those reactions instantly weaken attraction, because what she's actually looking for is emotional control. She wants to see whether you can handle sexual tension calmly. Can you acknowledge attraction without becoming reckless? Can you remain confident without becoming performative? Can you stay grounded while desire is present? That's the real test. If your energy suddenly becomes defensive, needy, overly excited, or apologetic, she feels it immediately. And the emotional polarity that was building starts collapsing. But when you remain composed, relaxed, and emotionally steady, something very different happens. She feels safe enough to continue leaning into the tension. That's why delivery matters so much here. A small pause before answering, a calm voice, relaxed eye contact, a subtle acknowledgement of the moment without trying to force it further. That combination communicates mature confidence far more effectively than any clever line ever could. And this is another place where many men fail because they think they need to do more. They try to escalate too aggressively, or they become overly careful and shut the energy down completely. Both extremes destroy the moment. The correct response is usually simple: recognize the tension, stay calm inside it, and let your presence carry the interaction naturally. Because what she's evaluating isn't your sexual history or experience. She's evaluating who you become emotionally when attraction enters the room. That's what matters. And this third question is powerful because it often marks the transition point where curiosity quietly becomes consent for deeper intimacy. Not forced intimacy, natural intimacy, the kind that develops through emotional awareness and mutual tension instead of pressure. Once you understand this, interactions stop feeling confusing. You begin recognizing the emotional rhythm underneath conversations instead of focusing only on words. And now we arrive at something even more important. These questions are never random. A younger woman does not accidentally ask all of these things. There is usually a progression happening underneath the interaction. The first question checks your direction and self-assurance. The second tests your emotional stability and composure. The third explores how you handle attraction and intimacy. There's a sequence to all of it. And most older men completely miss the pattern because they treat each question like an isolated event instead of recognizing the emotional progression taking place in real time. But tone reveals everything. A playful tone, a softer voice, longer eye contact, slight pauses, leaning in closer, lingering after the conversation should logically end. These details communicate far more than the actual words. That's why listening only to content is such a mistake. Attraction is emotional before it is verbal, and many men fail because they expect attraction to look obvious. They expect direct flirting, compliments, or aggressive pursuit. But younger women interested in older men usually communicate attraction indirectly. Questions become emotional probes, safe ways to explore chemistry without fully exposing vulnerability. And because the emotional risk is lower for her this way, she can retreat gracefully if your response feels wrong. That's why these moments matter so much. And ironically, most men destroy them by treating them like high-pressure situations instead of relaxed opportunities for connection. The more pressure you place on the interaction, the more attraction disappears. The calmer and more aware you become, the more natural the connection feels. Now let's talk about the biggest mistakes men make during these moments because this is where attraction quietly dies most often. The first mistake is over-explaining. A simple question turns into a long speech because the man feels he needs to prove his value, but attraction doesn't grow through excessive information. It grows through emotional tension and curiosity. The more you explain yourself, the less mystery remains. Another mistake is hiding behind humor. A little playfulness is attractive, but constantly joking to avoid emotional tension communicates discomfort, not confidence. Women notice immediately when humor becomes emotional avoidance. Another major mistake is reacting emotionally because you suddenly recognize the attraction and feel pressure. Some men become awkwardly serious. Some become defensive. Others become overly eager and start rushing the interaction. All of those reactions communicate instability, and stability is exactly what she was looking for in the first place. Many men also misunderstand leadership entirely. They think they need to dominate the interaction or constantly control it. But real masculine presence is quieter than that. It's calm, responsive, aware. It doesn't force, it doesn't perform, it simply remains grounded. And perhaps the biggest mistake of all is ignoring tone and energy completely. A woman can ask a playful question with obvious warmth in her eyes, and the man responds like he's answering a business interview. That emotional mismatch instantly kills chemistry, because attraction lives inside emotional alignment, not logical correctness. So how should an older man respond when he recognizes these questions happening in real time? Simple, with presence. When the first question appears, answer calmly and directly without trying to impress. When the second question appears, remain emotionally composed instead of becoming defensive or performative. When the third question introduces sexual tension, acknowledge it naturally without forcing escalation or retreating nervously. And throughout all of it, pay attention to her energy, not just her words, her tone, her pauses, her eye contact, her body language. Those details tell the real story, and above all, remain consistent. Because women are not only evaluating individual answers, they're evaluating your emotional pattern across the entire interaction. Can you stay grounded from beginning to end? Can you remain calm under tension? Can you hold emotional presence without needing validation? That consistency is what creates attraction that feels effortless and natural. At the end of the day, none of this is about manipulation or tricks. It's about awareness, the ability to recognize subtle interest, stay emotionally centered, and allow connection to unfold naturally instead of forcing it. That's what separates men who constantly miss opportunities from men who create genuine emotional tension without trying too hard. And once you truly understand these dynamics, You stop second-guessing yourself completely. Because attraction stops feeling confusing, you finally start seeing it clearly while it's happening. If this video from Intimate Psychology gave you a new perspective, leave a comment below and tell me which of these questions you've experienced before without realizing what it meant at the time. And if you want more content on attraction, emotional intelligence, male psychology, and the hidden dynamics most people never notice, subscribe and turn on notifications. New videos every week. I'll see you in the next one.